Welcome back to the show, everybody. Really excited about our next guest. Terry Bowden is a longtime friend, even though I haven't seen Terry in a long time. A couple months ago, actually, in Birmingham, his legendary late father, Bobby, was honored with the Nick Saban Award, and it was great to see Terry. I hadn't seen him in many years, even though I'd seen him on television and at some football games, etc. But, man, it's great to see him now. Terry, first off, how are you, my friend? What's going on?
I'm doing great. I don't know what to do. I'm head coach for 28 years. And I threw 10 years of broadcasting in the middle of that, and then I got retired early. It seems like that happens to coaches every now and then. So I was going to go till I'm 70, but got a new AD. He decided to retire me early. So I'm retired, but I'm helping some local high school kids working with their schoolwork and things like that with a school. But I'm also got a podcast on Sirius 159 working with us college football, doing what I did before. So I'm not ready to quit doing something anyway.
You know, I was looking back when you first started, and obviously you played at West Virginia, were a GA there, an assistant, and I didn't realize you were an assistant for Jerry Faust at Akron back in the day. Yeah. I mean, Terry, football, you've been coaching somewhere, and you even coached on television, basically, for more than, 40 years? 45 years?
Well, 1983 was my first year as a head coach. I was 26. Jimbo Fisher was my first quarterback I had. And then so I did. And then 30 years ago, it'll be 31 years ago now, was my years at Auburn. And so I took that 10-year sabbatical with ABC in New York. Then I've got 13 more years in after that, just kind of going back and trying building smaller programs and enjoying that. And so got 28 years in, but it was 38 total years because I had that 10-year layoff in football. But I think this will be the first year since 1955 that a Bowden hadn't been coaching in college. My dad started.
That's amazing. Time. You know, and people don't realize, I mean, you're not just a football coach from a football family, and I tell people, and I remember that, but I forgot. You were magna cum laude from West Virginia. You attended Oxford University. You got your law degree from FSU. I mean, Terry, there's not many coaches in the college football ranks who have your educational background. That's pretty impressive.
You know what? Hey, and when I went to Clemson as an analyst, I got my master's degree there. So I added a master's degree from Clemson to my law degree and my accounting degree. You know, I was always a better student than I was a football player. I wish I'd have been bigger, faster, stronger, because I love football. And I probably would have been a C student if they would have given me more size. But I was always a pretty good student. And I always, just like I tell my players, that education will give you options. It's a little bit what I'm worried about now with players changing schools. One of the negatives of the podcast is I don't think they care what major they're in. I don't care if I no telling what they're graduating in. I just think there's some loss of the focus on education first that I hate to see, and I guess we'll see how that's going to kind of go in the future.
Yeah, I'm gonna circle back to that because that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you. But first things first. And it was interesting. You know, the day your dad passed away, and I love the man. I was at SEC Media Days interviewing Jimbo Fisher, who was obviously the head coach at A&M at the time. This was a couple of years ago. And it was an emotional time for both of us. But the reason I bring that up, how's Jimbo doing? Are you still in contact with him?
Yeah, we talk occasionally. Me and Jimbo and Tommy. I told Jimbo, I said, I didn't know whether to console you or congratulate you with that buyout that you got. So, and Jimbo, and I can't speak for him, but he does have a passion for football. He loves, and I can see him, and not about the money. I can see him getting to about next December, and that fire in that belly will start back. He's too young to get out and too good. And if you coach long enough, you're going to go through some tough phases. That happens to almost everybody at some point. And nowadays, I mean, if you don't, they'll buy you out and they'll pay you off, but they'll get rid of you and move on. So anyway, we do talk. I'm sure he's staying in Tallahassee. He's still got a house in Tallahassee. Okay. Got his kids there. So I think that's where he's staying now.
You know, and I was a local TV guy in Birmingham back when you were at Sanford. Jimbo was the quarterback, and of course, your dad not only was a quarterback at Sanford, which was then Howard, and later was a head coach there. And now a statue stands outside Cyber Stadium, which is really cool. How neat was that to be coaching at the place where your dad really, I mean, he kind of made the place famous.
Oh, yeah, that was a special time. I still look back my brother Jeff was with me there when we coached there. It's probably the most fun, the most enjoyable time, because they had dropped football and they brought it back and worked winning. So if you can remember back to 1986, We were Division III, no scholarships. And the president, Tom Courts, hired me to move it to 1AA. Just forget two, jump it over. I said, let's try to win one season. So I kind of found me a ringer, got Jimbo to transfer, and about four of my guys from Salem College, and we went 9-1 that year. And then went on to go 1AA, and then in 4 years later went to the national semifinals there. But it was special being at Sanford. I saw my first football games at Howard College, sliding down those hills at that stadium. And 25 years later, my dad was the head coach there until 1962. And then 25 years later, in 1987, I come back to that school and help them bring football back. So it was a very special time, and I've always got a special place in my heart for Sanford because that's always been our family school. Grandparents, parents, then we coached there. Me and my brother Steve was a professor there, and Jeff and I coached there. So it's a lot of special times, and they're doing great too.
Yeah, and whenever I saw your dad, whether it was doing an FSU game or at a media type thing, hey boy, how you doing, boy? I mean, he was the best, Terry. He really was. I know you miss him.
Doug, it's funny because he's the only guy I ever knew that could call you buddy, and you would just think that's your name. He loves me. He remembered me. No, he calls everybody buddy, a gal or buddy, but he's the only guy that can call you buddy, and you feel like he's known you for all your life. But I miss him a lot. But my mom's still doing well. We spend a lot of time with her down in Tallahassee, and we know he's in a good place, looking down at us.
No doubt. Take us back again. I was in Birmingham when you got the Auburn job, and first season you go undefeated. Now it was a probation deal; you couldn't go to a bowl back then, but I think you won too much too early, right? Right, Terry?
Well, but at that point in time, because we won 20 straight. Last year was the 30th anniversary of the undefeated season, and it was special. That was a special time because Auburn had lost 3 straight years in a row to Alabama, had 2 non-winning seasons, 5-5-1 and 5-6, and we come back and win them all the next year, and then we go on to win 20 straight into 1994 before Alabama really Georgia. We missed a kick and Georgia tied us. Then Alabama beat us 21-14. But those were special times, and that was awful special. But that's a long time ago. I've been recruiting players for a long time now. They weren't even born. They don't even know that they don't even know I coached before I was on TV. So that was a different lifetime, I think.
Well, and one more question about that, because I remember in '97 SEC championship. I mean, you had Tennessee on the ropes, Terry. It was like 20-7.
Yeah, we got beat 30-29, and I know Peyton Manning threw a touchdown pass to Peerless Price or one of those receivers that he had in the fourth quarter. They threw a touchdown. Then we caught a pass going across the field for a field goal, and we fumbled maybe on the 35, 40-yard line. They are going back to try to score and win a game. But really, that was as good a Tennessee team as I've ever had. They won the championship, as you remember, the next year. But we almost won that championship, and that was in our 5th year. And that was our guys were real proud because that was, because the first year or two you went with Coach Dye's guys, and I always gave him credit. They were his guys, but we got them believing in themselves and winning again. Stan White, local guy there, led us to our victories. Great bunch of guys, but in 1997 we had a whole different group of guys. And we were able to almost just a point from winning the conference championship again there. And you mentioned something earlier that I won too big early. I wouldn't trade it because you never know when you're going to win big. And as you've looked at the years since I left Auburn, there's a lot of other coaches that had early exits at Auburn too. So I think that was just a trend and not something that I wasn't the only guy to get axed.
All right. Let's bring you modern day, and you touched on it at the beginning because. Modern day now, and obviously you were in it up until last year, and so much has changed since you left Monroe. I mean, it's crazy. And here we have all these kids who transferred, Terry. And I mean, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, all the Texas, they get kids coming in from everywhere. And these kids literally go to these schools. Many of them don't even attend class, Terry. I mean, is that... Am I getting too old, or is this okay?
Well, you know what? It's like it is what it is. I'm not sure that. I'm sure if you talk to, the reality is coaches are making a lot of money. Yeah. And these players, they feel like, well, what about us? And we opened up that can of worms, and it's not good. You can't put it back in. You can't close the can back up. Now we're talking about revenue sharing possibilities, employment possibilities. there's a lot of bad that goes with the good, and so I know I coached Saban when I was with him when my dad got his award. I think most of us that have coached a long time see the negatives. I mean, where do you meet your wife? Where do you meet your best friends?
Right.
Where do you join the fraternity? What are your school colors? Your fight song? They're out the window. It doesn't matter. I see guys now that don't even make it. They sign in January, and after spring ball, they transfer. They don't even get to a season. And I think what hurt me the most, because we were at ULM, and we've got the smallest budget, the smallest public school, the smallest salaries, don't have NIL money. And all of a sudden, I'm trying to win 2 or 3 games at the end of the season. And when you look out for that Friday night meeting, you can see about 2 or 3 guys. They won't even look at you because they've already been talked to. Because people are recruiting. The group of fives get recruited. And what happens is now you've got 2 or 3 of your best guys. They're not even paying attention to you in your meeting before the game because they know they're already out of there. And I said that was the toughest thing to put NIL along with a portal transfer and add those two together at the time we did. It's just changed football in ways that I think to coaches it's not as comfortable. But I will say this, and I've been doing some radio shows. I think the fan who doesn't get involved with it like you and I do, they won't see the difficulties that the coaches face, the ads face, the schools face. I do believe you're going to see as good a product on the field. On a given Saturday, you'll probably see teams that didn't have as good of players. Look at Ole Miss, how much they've gone with the portal. You're going to see teams. You're going to see some great football. One, I think, just because the young coaches, that's all they're ever going to know, how to deal with it. And then two, I think football has always been regional. College football has not been like the NFL. I didn't give a flip who played on the West Coast. Nowadays, if you're in the ACC, you may play Cal, you may play Stanford. If you're in the Big Ten, you got UCLA. In the SEC, at least you're going to Texas and Oklahoma. So I think the one thing, and then you got a playoff, so you might be playing those teams. So I think we've become a national team. We're going to start becoming more national, and that we in the South are going to care a lot more about what's happening on the West Coast, that we might even stay up till 9 o'clock and watch the games once in a while.
Well, I thought it was interesting. SEC Media Days, Kirby Smart makes the big appearance. You were at many SEC Media Days. Now it's bigger and more extravagant, and It's in Dallas. As they pay homage to Texas and Oklahoma coming in. But Kirby stands up, and the first thing he says is, I wish, Dan Lanning, his old assistant, now at Oregon, he goes, I wish Dan would get Phil Knight to send some of that NIL money our way. I mean, it's crazy that it's not what's happening in the SEC, it's what's happening all over at Oregon, right?
Well, it's all about the money. And if you look at the teams, Miami, Ole Miss has made a commitment. They're going to go get players, and it's legal. It's not breaking rules, and Miami's doing the same thing. Nobody's doing it better than Oregon with the Phil Knight money.
Wow.
And so what it does to me, now the kids aren't watching the facilities. They're not reading about the tradition. They're not reading about the history. Sometimes they're not even looking at the number of players that get to the NFL, where the real money gets down the road. It's what can you do for me lately, and that's what's kind of happening now. Even Missouri, they've done a great job with the portal too, and they're in the top half of the SEC the way they play. But who would have thought? It's funny. I've kind of got my top 5 in the SEC right now. And look at the schools that are not in that top 5, maybe Florida or Tennessee or possibly Auburn. Right now, if you pick the top 5 schools preseason, you've got some of the great teams in our conference can't get up to that top 5, at least in the preseason, with all the changes that are happening. But portal transfers has made it a little different. And like I say, the good thing is that the fan that sits in the stadium and watches the game, I think he's going to still see great football, because that won't change.
Well, and what's interesting to me, and I'm dying to hear what you think about, the SEC championship has been a mega success. Ever since it started back in 93, 92, 93.
92,
when Coach Kramer, he brought it in. And now no more divisions, so the top 2 teams will play. The winner gets the bye in the new 12-team playoff. And I would suspect the SEC is going to get 4 schools in. Terry, it would almost benefit you not to be in the SEC championship. I think that game, which has been so significant over the years, I think it's become somewhat diminished. In fact, it has, in my eyes, diminished ever since we have the 12-team playoff. What do you think?
Oh no, absolutely. There's no doubt that if you just think about it, and you've got a top 12 type position locked in. And the object's to win the national championship now.
Right.
The SEC, you didn't play for the national championship unless you kind of won the championship, the SEC championship. You couldn't make those Final Four unless you won that last game. And maybe you might make it if you lost it, but most of the time you had to win that game, and it was huge. Right now, it's all about making that 12-team playoff.
Right.
And so I'm not sure you won't see some guys sitting the bench or holding people out. I don't know how these conference championships, they're not always going to be the thing that you're trying to get more than the championship. And if you get hot after the season, you can win that national championship not playing in the conference championship very much, or winning the conference championship at all. The other thing is, could be curious, you could actually play a team 3 times in a year. If you played during the season and met again for the conference championship and then both made the playoffs, you may see it again. But I do think what you said was true. You're going to see 3 or 4 SEC teams, 3 or 4 Big Ten teams, then probably 1 ACC, 1 Big 12, 1 Group of 5, and then fill in after that. But I think the SEC, is scary as the conference is getting and how good it is, there's going to be a great chance to say, okay, I just got to get in that top 12 teams. And you're going to see the quality of football at least giving people an opportunity to play for the championship.
Well, I mean, the champion, they say, well, you benefit because you get a bye. You don't have to play that first round. You only have to play 3 games. But in essence, the third or fourth team, if they don't play the SEC championship, they still play the same amount of games. They got exactly 4, So, I mean, I don't know. And it's like basketball, Terry. You can win the regular season in basketball. You can win the conference tournament in basketball, and nobody even remembers. They just remember how you did in the NCAA tournament.
That's right. That's right.
That's it.
It's going to be different. And like I said, the portal has been different. The NIL thing has been different. Now the conference affiliation, it may not be over. Clemson and Florida State, they're working hard to get somewhere. I know they would be a huge benefit to the Big Ten as far as TV and money. I don't know what they add to the SEC actually in those type of things, but I don't think it's quite stopped yet. And where I get concerned, are we going to start pushing the Group of Fives out? The Sun Belt is unbelievably strong in the state of Alabama. When you look at South Alabama and Troy and in the Sun Belt, and then UAB and Jacksonville State, you've got a great Group of 5 schools, but I hope it doesn't get to the point where we get pushed out and don't get to play those games for the money, because that really helps from a revenue standpoint and a big game atmosphere for those young men.
Terry, I had Tommy on recently, and he brought up an interesting point. Obviously, FSU and Clemson, people are assuming they would be perfect for the SEC. Right. But he said, listen, Florida's not so hip on Florida State coming in. South Carolina's not so hip on Clemson. He thinks the SEC... He hears that if they want to expand, the commissioner said this week emphatically it's not on the table, which usually means it's on the table. But Tommy felt North Carolina and Virginia were the 2 schools that would ultimately make it 18 institutions in the SEC.
Well, it's about money. It's about the market and bringing in a better part of the market. And SEC already has a great Florida connection and South Carolina. And I think that's the thought that Tommy was talking about. And what makes me think that Florida State, Clemson would more likely head towards the Big Ten, because they don't have that southern part to their conference. They've got West Coast and all that.
Right.
And so I really don't know exactly how that will go, and I'm just not sure that it's over yet. It's not going to be over till everybody kind of gets protected, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Because right now there's 2 conferences that are better than everybody else. There's SEC and there's Big Ten, and ACC is kind of that 10 to 25 or 8. They're not quite that top 10 type teams. You might have 1 or 2, but mostly you're filling in that second group, hoping to get a second team into the playoff. Right now, the way that conference has gone, those conferences have gone.
Yeah, they're teetering a bit, needless to say. I like Coach Saban so far. I think he's going to be a great addition to game day. He's very opinionated, very prepared, he gives well thought out answers. It's not like off the cuff. And he has said several times at SEC Media Days, and people have flat out asked him, how good is Texas? Do you think Texas will come in right away?
Yeah.
And he said no. He goes, listen, you don't realize how good the SEC is, and he has respect for Texas. No question, Coach Sark was with him and won a national championship. but he thinks it's going to be tougher for Texas and Oklahoma than they realize until they jump into the SEC waters.
You and I go back to the not just the Southwest Conference, but the Big Eight. I mean, if Oklahoma beat Nebraska or Nebraska beat Oklahoma, they were going to the Orange Bowl or playing for a national championship. And then it got a little bit bigger when it got to the Big 12, but it was always just a couple of teams. To be honest with you, and I love the ACC too, but it reminded me of the ACC more than it did of the Southeastern Conference, and that will happen. Now, I will say this: Texas Sark knows how to recruit. And, what he didn't know, he picked up from Nick. Yeah, I think just like Kirby. Kirby was a GA for my dad, but Kirby was with Nick too. But they looked at his process, and I think Texas, as you know, I think Texas will be competitive for the conference championship. But I think Nick's exactly right. It's going to be a much tougher for Oklahoma and Texas to be in the top because it's so good over and over. So many teams that are so good, and the teams that are even not the top 5 right now have been great teams. Like Tennessee is just they're so close, and Auburn's right there getting close. And Florida, when maybe they got to make a change down there, I don't know, but you know how good they should be. There's more football players in Florida than there is the state of Alabama, Mississippi together combined because of population. So it's going to be tough. I don't think any. The good thing is you got to play off. The good thing is you don't have to win it, because if you look at that conference and oh my gosh, what a mess we've got into with this competition, and they say, well, wait, we can actually go 10-2. We can go 10-2 and make the playoffs. Not sure you can go 9-3, but I think we can go 10-2 and make the playoffs. So there's a silver lining in the fact that you're not necessarily going to beat up too much. Now the Big Ten makes you play 9 conference games. SEC is 8 plus a Power 5. I don't know. I kind of like that because you spread out and get somebody else from a different part of the country. But I think it puts you into a tough schedule.
The only thing, and the other thing, having a son who played college football, he was an offensive lineman, he got banged up. Terry, big kid. But, and now you're asking these kids to potentially play 16, 17 weeks. I know the NFL guys do it. But let's not forget, these college kids are not NFL players just yet, right? That's a lot of football.
We've been so hypocritical, because I remember when I first went to television, and the argument was we shouldn't play a conference championship. We couldn't have a playoff. Can't have a playoff. We just two teams. We can't have one more game. Education is too important. And then we can't have it go into the next school year. And all that was just thrown out for money. Every bit of those thoughts were thrown out for money. In fact, everything's been screwed up, because in the summertime there's no time off because of recruiting and portal transfers, the season going on, and I can still see the playoff going to 16 teams. That's what it was. I was at Sanford when we were 1AA. We went 16. I was at Salem College. We were 16 team playoff. I was at 1AA schools, Division II. Were playoffs with 16 teams, and so I could see it getting bigger and bigger, but it goes against everything we said was important. Education, not going over into the next semester, and not ruining the experience of college, to not make it like the pros. And now they've got the money, they've got the 16 game schedule almost, and we've changed our mind on everything, and it's all about money.
Well, yeah, and listen, I know I sound somewhat negative with some of these questions. I love the game, and I'm going to be watching. But the season starts August 24th, FSU over in Ireland.
Right.
It ends on January 20th. My goodness. And one of the playoff weekends will be opposite the NFL wild card weekend.
Right.
Terry, this season goes on forever. It's unbelievable.
Well, and I guess in the Deep South, where football's king, I think people love football, and they can't get enough of it. But again, this is being driven by the market and the money, and again, that's being driven now because we got to make money to pay a lot. Well, the kids now are going to get some kind of revenue sharing to some extent, unless things change. They've got to find ways to make more money, and it's kind of a shame, because I don't know where it can go. Where it can go backwards, because it's becoming professional football. It's becoming professional football for these athletes, and it's not going. And how can you say no? How can you get mad at them for not wanting what's being given to them? The sad thing about the NIL, and I'm not gonna be upset with players getting what they can get. But the sad thing is, it's not like you're an NFL player. You may have been you got that money because you were a big time recruit, and a lot of times guys are great recruits but not great players. They had the early they developed early or something. Then all of a sudden they're 21 and that money don't there ain't no there's no NFL and there's no more money in their pocket and there's no more it'll leave them so much sooner, and so there'll be some things that come up in football that we have to deal with on as they come up.
I just think, Terry, it's funny. I heard an assistant coach recently, who, by the way, carries the title of general manager at a university, and it said, well, how many recruits are you going to sign this year? And he goes, we don't look at numbers anymore. We just sign recruits, which basically means there's a constant flow. The door is always revolving. No. And they figure it out when they figure it out, right? It's no longer about numbers, because when you were at Auburn, it was always like, hey, Auburn signed 25 this year. Auburn has 24 scholarships. Yeah. That's no longer the case.
Yeah, remember sometimes we could go to 26 or 7, knowing that somebody would fall out like an airplane, somebody wouldn't show up, and you played games with. But now, I mean, the team management. I mean, managing your team, managing your roster. It's so difficult now because now they're leaving after spring ball, and now you've got to decide what can I do, where can I go. The saddest thing is the group of fives. We usually go, we're going to lose our best player. We're having to decide whether to play our players during spring. We definitely don't want our spring game on TV so anybody can watch them play because we're being recruited, And to be honest with you, the group of fives are looking at the 1AAs too. And so it's kind of it's a 12-month process of what's going on there, and it's just different. It's a different deal,
Yeah, but as I said a minute ago, I'll be watching. I'll be talking about it every week, and I know you will be too. So it is an exciting time, and I can't believe it's almost here. I mean, 5 weeks away or whatever, and we got the boys, FSU, your guys playing over in Ireland against Georgia Tech.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's gonna be a that'll be a great game there with Florida State, the game over there, and that game there. But there are gonna be some great early games. I'm here in Louisiana. You got LSU playing Southern Cal, and that's a big one because you're trying to get to 10 wins. If you can't win the conference, you got to find a way to get 10. Because I don't think 9 will get you in that playoff. And then Alabama. I mean, face it, we went through those. The 7 coaches. People say, well, gosh, Alabama. Bear Bryant, the greatest coach of all time, and Nick Saban, greatest coach of all time. There were 7 coaches in between those two.
That's right.
We remember Perkins, we remember Bill Curry, we remember Coach Stallings, who I coached against, and Mike DuBose, and then Francione, and Mike Price didn't even get to the season, I don't think. But
nope.
But it's not an easy place from a standpoint of it doesn't just happen, and it's a great place. And I think they got a coach with a great resume. You couldn't get a guy with more success where he's been. But that place can eat you up. It can eat you up if you're not a tough guy. And the 2 winning coaches of all time, they're pretty tough guys. They're pretty strong-willed people, and you've got to carry that. And I'll be interested to see how that goes. Not so, and I hope the best for the new coach, but that's a tough one. That's the toughest job right there in America. I used to think Notre Dame may have been back in the day, and I think Alabama, because of you can't win even conference championships and have people satisfied there.
Well, I thought it was funny. Coach Saban still, I mean, obviously he still has an office. And he said, listen, they have a great quarterback in Milroe. If he just,
they sure do.
And he said, he's only going to get better. But in typical Coach Saban fashion, he goes, I'm concerned about the secondary. Because that's his baby, right? I thought that was funny.
And it's funny because when you're a great team, then there are other teams that are loaded with talent like Alabama. You get beat one-on-ones is what gets you beat. Because if it's 11 guys having to block 11 guys, they've got 11 better guys. But when you can get a one-on-one touchdown, and when their secondary makes mistakes, remember Alabama versus Tennessee a couple of years ago.
Yes.
And the deep ball. So I know what he's talking about. It's funny. I don't know if you know, but when I was a GA at West Virginia, I did most of the recruiting for Nick. He was the coach. He was the defensive backfield coach at West Virginia when I was a GA there in 1970, before I went to Florida State. And then my father recruited him in high school. He grew up about 20 miles from Morgantown, where my dad was the head coach, and my dad was recruiting quarterbacks. But Nick was just a little bit short, so my dad signed his running back and didn't sign him. And that's kind of a sidebar there. But the connections go way back.
Wow, that's a great story. I was not, I knew he was a quarterback in the West Virginia area, and he's told the story how he was good in high school, but not good enough to quite play at West Virginia and other places. But I didn't realize that he coached at West Virginia too. Wow.
Yeah, he was there while I was there. I was a running back, but then I became a GA in January. I was only a GA for 4 months before I went to Florida State to be a GA. But it seems like every weekend he'd have me drive somewhere in the snow to pick up his recruits every week. And buddy, you were afraid. He was probably 27, 28 years old back then. But you were afraid not to get there on time even then, because I remember I'm not gonna disappoint him. I'm gonna find a way to get through the snow and get that recruit.
Wow. Great story. Terry, you need to write a book, my friend. You need to write a book.
Well, I don't know. I'd get in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. You know too much. Hey, Terry, we appreciate it. It is so good to see you. And I hope our paths cross this season. I hope you make it to Alabama maybe this season.
Get back to Birmingham. A lot of my great friends in Birmingham. So I appreciate it, Doug. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Terry. Bye-bye now.
All righty.